Rev up your engine! Now the Jeep Cherokees are a different type of SUV. It is a Jeep. This one has a Chrysler 6-cylinder engine, but it's a reasonable size SUV. You can see it's unitized construction. It doesn't have an actual frame. It's the modern design. And you can hear the engine is ticking away. This is a Grand Cherokee, but this is the 4-liter inline 6. In a smaller vehicle, they're okay. They're a bit underpowered for these. Now, being a Jeep, the hood struts don't work anymore, so I'm bringing a stick. Yeah, it's not gonna fall down now. Now you can hear the engine ticking. It's a 6-cylinder inline 4-liter, and the vehicle's got over 200,000 miles on it. As we rev it up, you hear the engine ticking. Now that ticking noise you hear is internal to the engine. Now it's not rod knock, because if the piston rods are knocking, when you rubbed it up, it'd go, and it isn't. It's a valve train noise. So I'll get up my headphones, my little electronic stethoscope, and start listening. We'll start probing all over the place. And the noise is definitely louder on the driver's side. Listen. You can certainly hear that. When I take the headphones out, stick my head in, it's definitely coming from over here, bouncing around. Well, in this case, it's the stupid fuel injector clicking, which is actually great news for the owner. He thought he might have had an engine problem. It's just the fuel injector making too much noise. Now, as they age, they're electric solenoids. They can make noise. If it runs okay, we're going to check the data to see if it's running okay. That's a big deal. It seems to be running good enough. All the injectors make a little bit of noise, but that particular one in the front's making the most noise of them all. So we'll climb inside, pick up this Autel scan tool, go to Diagnostics, Auto Scan, here we go. And while it's running its scan, realize I thought it was an engine noise revving it up. I realized it wasn't piston slap, and I thought, hey, it's valve train noise. But when I used my listening device on the passenger side, I didn't hear much noise, but I heard it all on the driver's side, and when I put it on the injector, I could hear the injector clicking. So rather than guess with what sounds like this, it sounds like that, sounds often sound similar. But in this case, when I put that detector on the injector, you could hear it clicking away. That particular device cost me like $60 on Amazon. They're worthwhile. The vehicle's got 210,000 miles. It's not showing any faults yet. It's looking good so far. There's not a single fault. Fault in the anti-lock brakes, he's not worried about that. He knows they're not working right. That's not something he wants to know, what the noise is and what kind of shape this thing is in. And since it's all 2003, the scan tool takes a while. These are old style computers, pretty slow. I do have to say, this is a Jeep Grand Cherokee that was built while Mercedes-Benz owned the company. It was called Daimler Chrysler. They actually are well built. They started to make them quite a bit better. Unfortunately, when Fiat took over, they started putting Fiat platforms and the quality started to go down. And they started crap like, we're going to sell Jeep Renegades. Renegade, that all those ads, right? Well, guess what? That's just a rebadged Fiat 4-wheel drive vehicle. Has nothing to do with Jeep. And the quality of the other Jeeps also, as far as I'm concerned, went down when Fiat took over, and even more that Stellantis has taken over from Fiat. This is when Mercedes built these things, and they're actually better built. All right, now, don't you see? Everything had passed except for the ABS. That was the only problem. We don't really care about that, but what the heck, we'll see what the problem is. We did it, we might as well tell them what's happening. It is a very technical code that you need a service manual for, so we'll just tell the guy, forget it, you know your ABS doesn't work right, don't depend upon it. You're gonna spend a fortune fixing it. And that's not what he brought it in for in the first place, anyway. So, what we wanna do is the engine data. We know there's no codes, we already checked that. So we will go to live data. And here we go, we got all kinds of live data. What I first want to look at is see if it's got any misfires. Now the computer's not showing any misfires. So that injector, although it's making noise, especially at idle lower speeds, it sounds worse than it is. Realize with 210,000 miles, if you start changing fuel injectors because one's clicking, you might as well buy a whole set and change them all because they've all got the same exact mileage on. So now we'll take it for a road test. See how it feels on the road. We're going to record the data. Now we'll start recording stuff. Now for its age, shift's pretty good. Doesn't make too much noise. Really handles pretty good for 210,000 miles. Now, as I said, this is a Grand Cherokee, and with the 6-cylinder engine, it'll go, but it's a bit underpowered compared to the V8 engines. The V8 engines have a lot more torque. But this one isn't too bad because it's a basic rear-wheel drive. And even though that injector's ticking away, so far the computer isn't showing any misfires or anything. If you really want to test for misfires, you want a loaded engine. So you want to floor it, see what happens. Like I say, it's not a race car with a 6. V8s are, but I don't feel any misfires. Nothing's really acting up. The owner's probably going to be happy. He thought he might have had an engine problem. But it's not the engine, it's the fuel injectors. And as far as I can tell, we'll floor it again. It's not affecting the running one iota. It's not misfiring, it's not hesitating, it's shifting fine. Realize that when Chrysler was Daimler Chrysler after Mercedes bought them, they were actually putting better transmissions in them. The earlier ones had a lot of transmission problems, but the ones when Mercedes were building them, look at this. Smooth power shift, upshift smooth, even though it's got 210,000 miles on it. I guess the facts just came down that Mercedes-Benz was losing too much money from buying them, and they got rid of the company because it was costing them too much money. They actually improved these things. But like I say, when Fiat got them and now Stellantis, they're not improving them anymore, I'll tell you that. They've taken so many steps backwards compared to what happened when Mercedes owned the company. Most of these straight 6 4-liter engines with mileage have a tendency as they age to have a little bit of a rolling idle. Anyone who's driven one of these knows what it feels like. And for this mileage, it's actually relatively limited in this. You can hear it. I can feel a little here on the armrest. But really, other than that, it runs perfectly fine. Really driving this thing around makes me feel it's a big shame that Mercedes gave up with them. Well, they were losing money. You can't blame the Germans. But they were making a higher quality vehicle than they're making today in these things. With 210,000 miles, you can't even really feel the shifting gears. Now, it ran fine as I'm playing this data back, and there's nothing odd in it. So my advice in this case is to leave it alone. It's running fine. I wouldn't start messing with the injectors so they click a little. Who cares? And the owner also said he thought an oil leakage he might have somewhere. So we got to get our stick again. Make sure it's tight so it doesn't whack us in the head. And for an engine with this kind of mileage, I wouldn't worry about it. Tiny bits of seepage. All engines with this kind of mileage, they're going to get a little wet. It's not dripping and burning on the exhaust. When you look and you see little seepage like that, that's normal in any old vehicle. I wouldn't start taking it apart and replacing gaskets. The only thing I'd say is you can see the power steering hose is starting to get kind of oily. If you want to be a fanatic, you can replace the power steering hoses. But again, it's not really dripping on the ground or anything. Unless you're adding a power steering fluid all the time, all things seep a little. If you want to, go ahead, change the hoses. All cars leak a little bit as they age. Now, if it started squirting out, sure, go ahead, change all the hoses out. But if you're going to do that, the pump itself has a little seepage around the main shaft. Then change the pump, that's even more money. It steers fine. I'd leave that alone too. It's an old Jeep with a lot of miles. It still might run quite some time. It's not going to be perfect. Fuel injectors click, but hey, it's still running pretty good. An old Jeep Grand Cherokee. Made a lot better when Daimler was making them, when it was Daimler Chrysler. Yeah, I'd rather have the V8 engine, but with a simple rear-wheel drive, no four-wheel drive system, good enough for getting this thing around. 210,000 miles, still running decent. Yeah, the fuel injector's clicking, but who cares? You don't want to be a fanatic about an old car like this. If it starts misfiring, let's say my scan tool would have said misfire cylinder number 1, and you hear the number 1 injector clicking like mad, what the heck, put another injector on. But it's running perfectly fine, and truthfully, I've seen those things go years, clacking 5 times louder than this, and they're still running, okay? So, hey. It's your money. You don't like the noise, go ahead and replace them. But if it runs as good as this, there's no need to if it's not misfiring. Such a shame that the company's been going downhill since Fiat and then Stellantis bought them. They used to make pretty good vehicles. Could last quite some time, but today, it's a different story. Some of them have those Italian diesel engines that are piles of junk. Some of them are just Italian vehicles, like the Jeep Renegade. It's just a rebadged Fiat, really. They used to make these Cherokees pretty good, but you know, now, like everything else, money's the bottom line. They're going to make them cheaper. You pay more for less. These old ones, hey, they can last quite some time. This one has, it's still got a lot of life left in it. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.